Mike Pence, former vice president, founder of Advancing American Freedom, author of the great book, So Help Me God. Mike Pence, as always, welcome back. First of all, Happy New Year. It's not too late to say Happy New Year.
Thank you, Larry.
And we were going to talk about oil and energy.
Same to you.
Maybe we will, but I got to ask you, from your experience as a sitting vice president and a former vice president, first of all, just generally off the top, what do you make of this story?
Well, look, equal treatment in the law is at the very center of American jurisprudence. And earlier this week, I called for that. I welcome the decision by Attorney General Garland to appoint a special counsel. If we have a special counsel reviewing classified materials that were found at Mar-a-Lago, we need to have a special counsel in this case, and that's progress. I don't understand why it took 2 months to come to that conclusion, and I'm troubled by the fact that there are reports that they found these classified documents more than a week before the November election. And so why the administration, why the Justice Department sat on that information that long, I think it's going to be an appropriate inquiry, not just for the Justice Department, but I expect members of Congress will be asking those questions on behalf of the American people. But the appointment of a special counsel in this case is right. It is proper. The handling of classified materials and the nation's secret is a very serious matter. And as a former vice president of the United States, I can speak from personal experience about the attention that ought to be paid to those materials when you're in office and after you leave office. And clearly, that did not take place in this case. But the unequal treatment before the law was deeply troubling to me early this week. I said so, and so I welcome the decision by the Attorney General to appoint the special counsel.
Mike Pence, let me just go back. So you're the vice president. You're the sitting vice president. You took classified documents home at night under the law. Is that correct? They wouldn't let me, by the way. I think, actually, a national security lawyer said to me today on the phone that I could have taken it. But I was a lowly assistant to the president. You're the vice president. Now, you were permitted under the law to take classified documents home, as I understand it, provided that you had a safe and secure place to read it. Now, that may or may not be right. I'm just asking you, how did it work when you were Veep?
Well, early in the morning, I received a presidential daily brief at the vice president's residence. I'd rise early. I'd go to the safe where my military aide would place those classified materials. I'd pull them out, review them. I'd receive a presentation to them. And then, frankly, more often than not, Larry, would simply return them back to the file that I'd received them in. They went in commonly into what was called a burn bag that my military aide would gather and then destroy those classified materials. Same goes in materials that I would receive at the White House. It was a standard process. You have a military aide alongside that looks to those materials, and so it was a very formal process in that regard. But to your point earlier, one of the issues after the raid last summer, which I thought was a gross overreach by the Justice Department, and I've said so on many occasions, the raid that took place at Mar-a-Lago. I know, having served years on the Judiciary Committee, I know there were many other steps short of executing a search warrant at the home of a former president of the United States that could have resolved that issue and obtained those documents. But the reality and the unequal treatment here in the law, the special counsel has now been remedied. But I don't ever want to diminish the importance of protecting classified documents and the nation's secret. And there was a very formal process during my time at the White House to see to that.
Well, Mike, let's go now and move along. You retire from the vice presidency, and you begin your new life, and you write a book. A very good book. The book talks about various issues, including national security-related, foreign policy-type issues. Now, what were you allowed or not allowed to do with respect to so-called classified documents? What was the drill? How did you do it?
Well, the one thing I never did was suggest that as a former vice president, I had the authority to declassify documents, or as a sitting vice president. The president of the United States does have the authority to declassify documents. And, the former president makes the assertion that he did that. But as a former vice president, Joe Biden had no authority to declassify documents or to retain them in his possession. And so I do think that's a specious distinction here, and one that that really should inform the inquiry going forward.
But you were able to see. I mean, again, national security lawyer said to me, "You got to go to the National Archives. Go to the National Archives. You can read various classified documents to your heart's content, because that's a safe and secure place." I don't know what the other ground rules were. If you had a SCIF in your home in Indiana, I mean, I don't know anything about it. But were you able to read classified documents after you left the White House?
Yeah, my understanding as a former vice president, I retained a security clearance. But candidly, having moved back home here to Indiana and settled on 5 acres with a pond and traveling around the country as we have the last 2 years, getting that book written, we've never taken the opportunity to do that. But my expectation is, just as when I was traveling as a vice president, that any review of classified materials would have to have taken place in a secure location.
Where is the FBI right now? This is the part I don't get. There's so many ambiguities about this story as it plays out. I mean, there's so much I do not know. Maybe you know more. But the point, they're discovering these classified documents in places where they're not supposed to be, as Andy McCarthy walked through, and as you yourself suggested. Where's the FBI? Why isn't the FBI covering these? At the very minimum, they're crime scenes. And then I recall last summer at Mar-a-Lago, they wanted this unbelievable break-in, thoroughgoing scrub to allegedly look for more. I'm not trying to get at the politics here. I'm just saying, where's the FBI? What are they doing? I mean, what are they doing today? What did they do yesterday? What are they going to do tomorrow to scrub this thing and see how many high, top secret classified documents are where they shouldn't be? I don't understand this. Where's the FBI?
Well, I think it's the right question. It's one of the reasons why I was glad to see Speaker McCarthy and the new House Republican majority establish a new committee in the Congress to investigate the politicization of the Justice Department and various agencies. Look, I write about it a lot in my book, as you know, Larry, about the politicization that took place at the Justice Department. We actually had an FBI agent that falsified a document to obtain an ongoing search warrant. We saw 2.5 years of the Russia hoax in the Mueller investigation, and the list just goes on. So one of the reasons I was most troubled about executing a search warrant at the home of a former president of the United States last summer is because I think now is the time the Justice Department ought to be restoring public confidence that they are above politics and they believe in equal treatment in the law. And I got to tell you, the thing that I'm probably most troubled about right now, I welcome the appointment of a special counsel, but why did it take this long? I mean, Larry, the fact that the information we have is that the first tranche of Biden classified documents was discovered more than a week before the election. And not only was it not revealed to the American people who were going to the polls on Election Day, but also for 2 months, presumably, the Justice Department sat on this information before it was made public to the American people. I don't understand that. That doesn't sound like equal treatment before the law to me. And I think those are exactly the kind of questions that I expect the leaders in the House and Senate are going to be asking. So
just to conclude this, and we appreciate I want you to come back and talk about energy policy, which was the original intent. But here we are, live news, fast breaking live news. But you're writing this book. The book's got foreign policy segments in it. You know a lot about foreign policy down through the years as a former House member and so forth and so on. I guess what I'm asking is, if you needed to find classified documents, would you go to the National Archives? In other words, this business about carrying them with you to I know you have a new home in Indiana and so forth, strikes me as bizarre that Biden's taking that. What gives him the authority to walk around with these documents? Did you ever walk around with these documents in retirement when you left the White House?
Larry, before we left the White House, the attorneys on my staff went through all the documents at both the White House in our offices there and at the Vice President's residence to ensure that any documents that needed to be turned over to the National Archives, including classified documents, were turned over. So we went through a very careful process in that regard. And I will tell you, just as careful, in writing my book, I submitted the portions of my book that dealt with foreign policy and national security for a national security review. That's very customary. I wasn't required to do that, but I thought it was the responsible thing to do to make sure that and when we told our story and we told about the work that we did on behalf of America around the world, that we would not compromise any classified materials. Look, I never want to diminish the importance of protecting the nation's secrets and protecting classified materials. But I must tell you that the fact that it took more than 2 months for the American people to learn that Joe Biden had taken classified materials to his personal residence when the President of the United States was subject to a search warrant and a special counsel, and the immediate disclosure of that, I presume, to the American people. These are questions the American people deserve answers to. But we've made a step of progress today for equal treatment before the law, and I welcome the appointment of a special counsel.
Yes, well, likewise, same way. Mr. Vice President Mike Pence, thank you very much. I hope you'll come back soon, and we can talk about energy, if you promise.